I feel like I write because like that's who I am or something like that. My dad was a writer, his dad was a writer, and his dad was a writer, and my mother's father was a writer, and my mother's grandfather was a writer, and all the uncles and stuff like that. I mean, it's just somehow, I don't know if that can be genetic or something, but it's there. And, you know, I mean, I just saw people write. I usually am trying to clear the decks so I can sit down and write, because that to me is very pleasurable. And it's probably some kind of addiction, you know? I mean, it's related to my just addiction, you know, addled personality. Like there's always addiction, you know, and this one is less destructive than some, you know, I hope anyway. Yeah, my dad was like a science writer. After he worked on the Geographic, he worked at Science News and then Defenders of Wildlife. I was a copy boy at the Washington Star, where my dad had been a reporter in the 50s. You know, daily newspaper, afternoon newspaper in D.C. And the Washington Star croaked while I was working there. It died. And I got my dad's like file, although I have misplaced it. And I was completely delighted by his writing in the 50s. He was a kind of a humor writer. And I think he felt very constrained and too edited at the Geographic. And that was a problem. Like, he lost his voice at the Geographic. On the other hand, he loved to write, man. I mean, he'd sit there with, you know, I mean, he's a manual typewriter, type with 2 fingers. He said it was the Columbus method, discover a key and land on it. And he would just sit there chain smoking Pall Malls, ashes dropping into the keyboard. That's the moment he seemed happiest, I think, when I would see him writing. You know, and when I started writing as a kid, and I started writing sort of for my dad, actually, like he gave me assignments and stuff. You know, and I'd whine about how I didn't know what to do, or like I didn't feel like doing it right now, and he'd be like, "No, man, look, this isn't some kind of artwork you're doing, man. This is, you know, just sit your ass down and write." You know, his view was like, okay, we need 17 column inches by 4 o'clock or whatever, and you know, that's what he'd give you. It might not be perfect, you know, but that's kind of the way I think about writing, I guess. I want to think about it as a craft rather than an art, let's say. And like what I tell like a young professor, and this is probably terrible advice in a certain way, is if you're trying to figure out what to write and how to write about what you want to write about, and write about it how you want to write about it. I mean, I think people have this, they often have this vision like it has to be of a certain form. It has to have the academic voice and so on. Well, it doesn't have to, you know what I mean? And and if that's where you're at, if that's a natural voice for you, then good. But probably you hate writing because you're trying to force yourself to do something you don't want to do. You're trying to force yourself to write about something you're actually not that interested in. You're trying to force yourself to write about it in the proper way. Now, on the other hand, I have not had like the gold-plated academic career. And that's one reason. I mean, I keep acting a little inappropriately, or I keep writing a little inappropriately. And so it keeps like not quite working out. I mean, at least I feel like that's one factor in my professional struggles, you know. I probably don't have extreme civility as a blogger, you know, but I didn't really have extreme civility as a columnist. In the late 90s, I wrote a piece, I think for maybe an anthology on architecture or something. And it was called, and this is before September 11th, it was called Why the World Trade Center Has to Explode. And it was an attack, an intellectual attack on the World Trade Center as a symbol of this kind of first of all, of like overweening gigantism. In my most recent book, I say that the attack on the World Trade Centers on 9/11 was an act of art criticism. Let me say that it was also an act of murder. All right, when they flew planes into this thing, the same day, on September 11th, I got maybe 3 or 4 emails from different people. And so they were like, you know, happy now, asshole. But on the other hand, you know, I've been able to really do what I wanted to do. I mean, the moments I haven't liked in my own writing were moments where I compromised with that, where I tried to impress somebody, or I needed to publish in a journal or something like, you know, and so I lost my own voice a little bit. This is something that should be fun and good, instead of, just a bunch of exercises, in grammatical construction.